the New World Order, and the conspiracy to cover it up, the shadow government's agenda in keeping us asleep, the injustice, catastrophe, and the global chaos are all indications that we are living in a period of time known as the end of days. Are you looking for answers? They are out there, and together we will find them as we navigate through End Times Now with Bree.
How's it going, guys? Welcome to another episode of End Times Now with Bree. Here, the topic of conversation that I have between me, myself, and this microphone, and hopefully your ears, is the end times. I want to first thank you guys so much for the support that you've shown. I'm so humbled, and I'm just so grateful for all of you. I've had stories come in, lots of words of encouragement, some ideas. I'm elated and just overwhelmed. That being said, though, I'm looking for people who have something to say, and maybe they have a cool story that they want to tell. Maybe there's something that simply can't be explained. That's always really cool. Or, if you're going through something and you feel that you need to put it out there, that you're feeling the pull, that maybe you need to say something about it. I feel like there's a stigma with people who may have some things going on, and maybe it's a crisis and maybe it's not. But if you're going through something that's hard and you just need someone to chat with about it, I'm willing to bet that your story will probably help someone else, even if at the very least realize that maybe they're not alone, And I've also had some people reach out with some questions and some comments, which is pretty awesome. I'm going to address some of that in this episode. I'm just so thankful, you guys. Just keep it up. Bring it on. I want more. I'm hungry for more. So you can email me at Proton Mail, End Times Now with Bree at protonmail.com. And then you can also find me on social media. I think I'm the only Bree who's talking about end times, but it's End Times Now with Bree on social media, and I'll be sure to put all the links in the description for you as well. And then also, if you're able to listen to me on Spreaker, they give me a 10% boost if you listen through that platform, which is helpful. However, if you're listening on Spotify or some other platform, ratings are also a good thing, and that helps out quite a bit as well. And also, if you didn't have a chance to see the video that Eric and I did, head over to YouTube. I haven't put it on Rumble yet. It took me, I was going through some massive technical difficulties just trying to get it onto YouTube. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I think depending on the feedback that I get from you guys, we'll go from there. But go check it out. It's on YouTube. We decided to have like a candid conversation. It was pretty fun. Eric and I have been together for 23 years. We actually still like each other sometimes when we're sleeping. I'm just teasing. It's not always sunshine and rainbows, but the idea here is that we want to share that with you because we know that there are other couples out there who probably go through the same things we do. And we're different people, right? So we want you guys to get to know us better and see how dysfunctional we are, right? No, I'm just teasing. But seriously, the idea is that we really do want to be as raw as possible and not edit anything. But last time I had to because my kid came into the kitchen half naked. So yeah, I think they frown on that on YouTube. Anyway, go check that out. We want to hear your thoughts on it. Okay. So the question for today, guys, is how do we discern through the deception, distraction, and division? Right? There's so much of it out there. How do we discern through all of it to see, what's coming from where? And I'm just going to tell you right now, there is so much going on in this episode. It was hard sometimes to do this one because there's just so much that we're going to unmask here, a lot of evil that is actually right out there in the open for everybody to see. But yeah, there's a lot to it. So be prepared. And one of the things is that I got an email from a really sweet lady named Carolyn, and it was extremely timely because I'm going to, this episode is going to address some of those things, and it's loaded. It's loaded. In fact, there were several times when I actually felt sick to my stomach. I'm just going to say that. I don't think that you will, but just the amount of research that I had to do on some things in particular just really irritated me beyond the point where I was just like, you know what? Yeah. Anyway, so before I break all that down, I want to address some things that are taking place currently. And you have probably heard about them. If not, I don't know, maybe not. But it fits very nicely with what Jesus said would happen in the end of days. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring in the questions of our listener, Carolyn, who sent in that very encouraging email. Thank you, Carolyn, for that. And I'll tie it all together because it's really important to be able to sift through the what's what and have the discernment on literally everything that's going on right now. So what I've noticed is that the enemy has got some big ones. Like, wow. And if you haven't heard about this yet, here you go. A satanic temple, apparently the only satanic temple that's recognized by the IRS and the United States Supreme Court or whatever it is. They're the only ones that are recognized as a church. They displayed a statue for the holidays inside the Iowa Capitol building in Des Moines. And a former U.S. Navy fighter pilot by the name of Michael Cassidy. He's 35 years old. He ran for office. He is from Lauderdale, Mississippi. He was charged with fourth-degree criminal mischief. And the Iowa Department of Public Safety said Friday that he was released after his arrest. And what happened was literally he went over to the statue. He's a Christian. He went over to the statue and he took the head off of it and he stuck it in a plastic bag. And then he went down to the what's it called? The front desk or whatever. And he told him what he did. And they just kind of looked at him like, oh, okay. They gave him a citation. He was arrested. He didn't hide, which I'm like, this dude deserves a medal. Anyway, he had a fund to help with his legal defense, and that fund hit 20 G's, which was enough to cover the charges at the time. However, as of yesterday morning, he was notified of more potential legal charges, unfortunately. So he has had to open up the legal fund again. And so I haven't been able to find it yet. I'm looking for it. I'm going to go ahead and post it in the link. I'm just like, whoa. But the crazy thing, as if it's not already crazy, that there's a statue of Satan in a Capitol building, but they initially wanted to use a real goat head. So there's that, right? I mean, the thing, there has to be a line drawn somewhere, right? Anyway, you can do this, just no real goat heads, okay? Anyway, so I have yet to see one person report on this, but there was something hidden in this display, and I caught it on one of the pictures, and it's actually a statue of Ishtar, who is also known as Inanna, Aphrodite. Oh, and then there's the Semiramis, which she's an important one. But the list goes on. I know you've heard me say before that they're all relative, right? They're all the same. But I'm working on an episode that deals with the who's who in the land of the small g's. But in this particular case, this goddess is, her spirit is attacking our youth. And she has a cameo in this atrocity sitting in the Capitol building. One of her abilities actually is to change a person's gender. And I'll just leave that right there for now, and we'll save the rest for that episode. But here's the thing, guys. We need to know who Baphomet is. Baphomet is the name of this thing that they erected, and he's the god of the temple of Satan. Okay? So in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 31, it says, "You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, for every abominable thing that the Lord hates, they," the Canaanites, "have done for their gods. For they have burned their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods." After that, several centuries later, despite persistent warnings, God judged his people for sacrificing their own children to the gods of Canaan in the Hinnom Valley, located on the south side of Jerusalem. Jeremiah goes on to say in chapter 7, verses 30 through 32, he says, "The open air sanctuary where the child sacrifice place took place, was known as the Tophet." And they have found evidence of this, by the way. There were infants and children all over the site. I want to say that the oldest that they found, I think, was 5. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. But this is the thing. The ancient people who strayed from God to worship guys like Baphomet. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't do that. No, I should. Definitely. I'm going to. Put their babies on a pyre that was built in his belly and burned them alive. In 2015, in my hometown near Detroit, a giant 3,000-pound statue of Baphomet was unveiled. I can't, because I'm just going to laugh. Like a little kid, like a little child. I think that word's funny. Anyways, it was unveiled, and standing next to him on either side is a little boy and a little girl. And they're looking at him with adoration, as if he's some giant teddy bear or something. What's weirder is that the ancient depictions of Baphomet actually has breasts. He's ambiguous. He's a transsexual, which goes to show you how much these people who worship this thing don't know about it. Because this guy in particular that was unveiled in 2015, well, I mean, he's got pecs, and like he looks like his upper body strength is like Bruce Lee. Okay, but I digress. In his belly, there is a void per se. It's called a caduceus is what it's called. There's a caduceus inside this void, and what that is it's a staff with 2 serpents that are swirling around the staff as if they're mating. And the symbology is often mistaken for Asclepius, who is the god of medicine and, quote, healing, but it's actually different. Although it's related, this staff with 2 snakes is related to Hermes. But again, I'm going to have to save that for another episode as to who he actually is. But for now, we'll just keep it simple. Asclepius had 1 snake and Hermes has 2 with a pair of wings. But in this case, Baphomet, his 2 wings, serves the purpose of the wings of this particular staff of Hermes. The other thing is that Hermes was a messenger god. And this is just a little side note here. Angels are also called messengers. So to me, this is like akin to how fallen angels became the small g's. Like they were actually the quote unquote mythical gods per se. But that's just my opinion. It just fits to me. Hermes also came to be known as the patron god of negotiation, trade, and commerce, and the staff can be seen printed on Roman coins dating back to the 1st century. So, commerce and money, right? But there's a lot of confusion regarding these 2 staffs. Like half of medical facilities versus non-medical facilities they're like interchangeable. It's kind of strange. But again, it's all relative. And I don't find it surprising whatsoever because the United States Surgeon General's flag, and it's still this way today, and the symbol of the U.S. Public Health Service both still use the caduceus, which is Baphomet. It's the staff between Baphomet's legs. The medical industry in particular, Big Pharma, has in fact become a business and a trade, right? It plays a huge role in the global agenda. And the Bible calls it pharmakeia. And it means the use or administering of drugs, poisoning, sorcery, magical arts, often found in connection with idolatry and fostered by it. Also, it's a metaphor for the deceptions and seductions of idolatry. So yeah, it's clear that Baphomet is associated with both of these things, medicine, commerce, and oh yeah, there's that other thing, your kids. Because if you're living in Cordova, Tennessee, or you know anyone else that is, you're going to want to share this with them. They might already actually know about this. But the other thing is that these things are popping up wherever there are Christian clubs in schools, okay? And this is what we're seeing. And I don't see this being too far off because the ACLU has, they have represented the Temple of Satan in the Supreme Court, and they won. So anyway, Chimney Rock Elementary School, elementary school in Cordova, beginning January 10th of next year, 2024, is beginning their first after-school Satan club. After-school Satan club. And this is what MSN, just to let you know, like I open up my computer screen and this thing pops up because I just use Microsoft, right? So I don't necessarily subscribe to one particular news outlet, just to let you know, but this is how MSN reported on it, which of course is biased. But I think it's funny because there's literally like no outrage at all. They don't call out the lie of what's reported. It's crazy. Anyway. So Mr. David Royer says, after weeks of controversy, officials at a Tennessee school district say that despite some community objections, a school program operated by the Satanic Temple will be allowed to operate on campus facilities in January. The club is a project of the Satanic Temple, otherwise known as TST, which, despite its name, doesn't worship the biblical figure or even believe that Satan exists. Instead, TST says Satan is a literary figure representing, quote, rejection, tyranny over the human mind and spirit, end quote. The religious organization is well known for its advocacy, saying it aims to encourage empathy, reject tyrannical authority, in addition to promoting common sense and opposing injustice. Okay. TST says after-school Satan clubs provide a safe and inclusive alternative to Christian-based groups that may seek to convert school children to their belief system. Lord mercy, please. On Wednesday, Memphis Shelby County Schools interim Superintendent Tony Williams addressed the public, surrounded by a group of faith leaders. Williams said about half of the district schools are supported by faith-based institutions. She says, I want to ensure you that I do not endorse, I do not support the beliefs of this organization at the center of the recent headlines. Memphis Shelby County Schools Superintendent Tony Williams said Wednesday, I do, however, support the law. As a superintendent, I am duty-bound to uphold our board policy, state laws, and the Constitution, which is total bull because we have anti-blasphemy laws in place just for that reason. She's just scared, is all that is. What she needs to do is get bold, because if anybody knows, right? So Satan, the word Satan means adversary. The word in and of itself is evil. The word Satan is evil. And now you're going to put that on our kids. Okay, cool. The Chimney Rock chapter will be the organization's 5th active club in the nation, number 5. Miss June Everett, who is the campaign director, said it started after she was contacted by some parents at that school district expressing interest. I highly doubt that. I'm just saying. Here are some of the planned activities for the club. It includes science and community service projects, puzzles and games, nature activities, and arts and crafts. It says that its after-school Satan clubs encourage critical thinking, rationalism, creative artistry, and science. And it's for children's ages 5 through 12 who are allowed to attend with parental permission. Okay, so the founder of this atrocity says proselyte. They're not trying to convert people, y'all. That's what it says. Proselytization. Oh, my Lord. Oh, that's funny. Anyway, that thing is not our goal, is what he says. We're not interested in converting children to Satanism. We prefer to give children an appreciation of the natural wonders surrounding them, not a fear of everlasting otherworldly horrors. Okay. All of that is such a hypocritical statement because of the very fact that science has proven that there's other dimensions, right? And, yeah, okay, I'm just going to move on. So there's a school board member. His name is Mauricio Calvo. He represents the district that contains Chimney Rock, and he said the board would explore legal alternatives to mitigate the situation. But others were more direct in their opposition, thankfully. A board chair by the name of Althea Green, who's also a pastor, said, Satan has no room in this district. I agree. Though the temple says it doesn't have any required rituals, the Temple of Satan acknowledges some rituals that members have participated in addition to the aforementioned unbaptism, there are also destruction rituals. Participants destroy objects symbolizing their pain in their lives, as well as defiance rituals. Participants take a pledge to challenge the status quo in a personally meaningful way. I mean, okay, what does that look like? And the logo for this thing, like, I just can't. I'm like, seriously right now? But guess what? It's not just in Tennessee, y'all. It's in Warren County, Ohio. That started in January of 2022. Lebanon City Schools asked the public not to gather or protest the after-school Satan Club. Also, it's in Moline, Illinois, at Jane Addams Elementary School. Joyner Elementary School in Greensboro, North Carolina. Hey, neighbors. And also the, I think it's called Saucon Valley School District in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Yep. And they're growing. So the dude that's behind this, his name is Lucian Greaves, but he changed his name. He was originally a Douglas Mesner. He's a Harvard-educated neuroscientist, which should definitely be of concern. But listen to this hypocrisy. He goes on to hold a black mass at Harvard, and he puts testicles on the headstone of the Westboro Baptist Church's founder's mother's tombstone. All in the name of encouraging empathy, rejecting tyrannical authority, promoting common sense, and opposing injustice. In one interview, he says, I knew that once I publicly attached myself to Satanism in this way, I could not go back. I had to vindicate, y'all, I cannot talk today. I had to vindicate the Satanic Temple or be ruined by it. Duh, bruh. Don't you know who you playing with? Man, these people. But yeah, keep on preaching it and that common sense and all. because you're just killing it, dude. You're killing it over there. That's just, And of course, they have their own website. And the first thing that you see on the homepage is a Satanic Temple health program. It's an abortion clinic called Sam Alito's Mom's Abortion Clinic. And it's vomit inducing. If you guys don't know who Sam Alito is, he was instrumental in turning over Roe v. Wade. But wait, there's more. They sell books. And like Christmas is right around the corner, guys. So you can pick up the children's soon to be classic, Goodnight Baphomet, which is only $25. Or you can go for some of these other ones. Let's see. I'm going to just go ahead and pop on over here. We have the Satanic Temple's Guide to Religious Freedom in Public Schools. And it's literally a cartoon girl. She looks like she should have been part of like the Jetsons. She's got her golden chalice. She's got her pentagram and her skull. And she's in her robe, her black robe. Like there's so many books here. It's just Compassionate Satanism. Yeah, The Devil's Death, Your Satanic Companion for Grief and Dying. If you guys aren't puking yet, like, oh, here we go. The Satanic Children's Big Book of Activities. And like, you look at these kids, it's cartoon kids on the cover. And I'm just like, what in the world? Check this out. So the Goodnight Baphomet. So like it's rhymes and whatnot. And this is pretty telling. It says, if it doesn't hurt, be kind to all, every creature, big or small. Use good sense and follow through. But just remember to love you too. Do what's fair and never stray, even when rules get in the way. Always stand for what is right, and when it's dark, you'll be the light. Okay, so let's break that down, shall we? First of all, it sounds so beautiful, right? It sounds so beautiful. But it's totally Luciferian. It's totally Luciferian. And I'm not going to buy the book so I can read the rest of it. But, yeah. That's what you would call deception. And guess who else is going to sound just like that? Yeah, his name's the Antichrist. Make it make sense, please. I can't. So, I feel like we're at DEFCON 5 these days. Because we humans are extremely easy to manipulate, and going on to this website and looking at the things that they were doing, like these kids are wearing these shirts, and you could see on a few of them it said Hellfire something or another. And they're kids. They're kids, and they're luring these kids in with like cool stuff, you know? And I'm just like, wow, that's you got some big ones right there. Anyway, so here's the thing, I feel like because everything is rapidly moving towards this era, we really need each other to help navigate through this giant swamp of poo. It just always seems to be going in a way where the plan is clearly derived from the enemy on the other side. It means that its main purpose is to always be aimed at veering us off of course and away from the truth. So we have to stay on point. Do you remember when I said that every general that's ever won a war does so because he knows his enemy better? This is exactly what I'm talking about. We need to get to know our enemy better, right? How much do you know your enemy? But I'm going to say this. Before you get like this bright idea to go off and start hunting down these rabbit trails, I'm going to hand out a very serious warning. The things of the unseen are not to be underestimated, taunted, or played with. If you're not 100% sure that you're covered by Christ, and you're not, you're not 100% concrete in that, then you need to still, but you're like teetering on the fence. You need to still be asking God to reveal to you the things that you need in order to be spiritually protected. Otherwise, your chances of falling into these delusions they're there. Okay. It's happened to so many people. Just look around, But in reality, it's simply recognizing that we're human. And since Adam, we were born into a world of sin that separates us from God. So as a result, God bridged the gap to get us home. He wants to bring us home. And so he used his son. And all we need to do is invite him in and believe that he is who he says he is. And that he did in fact die for every single one of us, so that at the end of this war, we can go home to him and not to an eternal like death prison thing. In general, it's called hell, but there's so many depictions of it. It's incomprehensible, actually. And I'll do an episode on it when I do near-death experiences, which I'm also working on. Of course, in the meantime, if anybody has any questions regarding this, or if anyone needs help with this, if anyone needs more proof that you can believe the words that I'm giving you, you know where to find me, yo. But all you got to do is look around at the amount of people out there who are openly worshiping Satan. Like, when they unveiled that thing in Detroit, I was mortified. I couldn't believe it. I was kind of freaked out. I was like, what? People are actually doing this? Like, openly worshiping Satan? And you start to see their reasoning behind it, and the amount of deception is absolutely insane. They'll literally say that Satan is just misunderstood. And what's scary about that is that it's true. It's totally true. He is misunderstood because people think that they understand him. But he's smarter than we are. And he hates us. He even hates the ones who worship him. Okay? Why? Because he hates God more. And y'all, they're not even hiding it. It's just gross. So by now, if you've listened to any of my last episodes, I tend to say this all the time, and I'm going to keep on saying it. I'm sorry if it's repetitive, but there's some things that are just so important. They need to become like second nature so that you can start to see it instantly. And that is that everything is relative. One day, you're going to be sitting there. If it hasn't happened already, one day you're going to be sitting there, it's just going to click. You're going to see something will happen, whether it's personally in your life or breaking news on Twitter or whatever. And you're going to get to a point where you can literally see and connect the dots before the scenario is even over. And you'll be able to see what happens. And know that you're right, that you connected the dots before it even happened. For me, it was almost like I started seeing in real color. Like, I can't explain it any other way. It was like things just started to be way more real. I don't know how else to explain that. By the way, my kid actually asked me when I turned, he said, when did you turn from black and white to color? Like, that's how old he thinks I am. He thinks I'm that old. And according to him, I knew the little rascals. Like, we were friends. We were buds. Spanky and I. Anyway, that brings me to my next thing, actually. Just thinking about this whole episode is probably going to be a lot to take. I know that it was a lot for me to take because these things make me angry. But it's a righteous anger. It's the same kind of anger that Jesus showed when he flipped the merchants' tables in the synagogue. Y'all, Jesus was savage when it came to making a point like that, okay? But seriously, just remember that justice wins in the end, and you're going to be part of that, hopefully. So if you haven't heard about this yet, this came out a couple days ago about the Boston mayor, Michelle Wu. Her assistant, one Denise Dos Santos, who happens to be a woman of color, made a colossal oopsie. It's like hitting the reply all. Like, She sent out the following invitation. Okay. Honorable members, on behalf of Mayor Michelle Wu, I cordially invite you and a guest to the Elects of Color holiday party on December 13th at 5:30, blah, blah, blah. DeSantos followed up the email 15 minutes later, apologizing for the invite, clarifying that it was only meant for the city's 6 counselors of color. The 7 white counselors, they were not invited. She says the 7 white council members were not welcome. Those were her words. She goes on to say, I wanted to apologize for my previous email regarding a holiday party for tomorrow. I did send that to everyone by accident, and I apologize if my email may have offended or came across as so. Sorry for any confusion this may have caused. Bang up job there, ladies. Well done. I'm giving you a hand. That was awesome. There was no apology for actually planning to host a racially segregated party, which is a problem. And then City Councilor Frank Baker told the Boston Herald that it was unfortunate and divisive. And there it is, friends. Division. That's division. And that's exactly what the devil wants. And he's going to use things like this. And Jesus said that he would use things like this. So first of all, can you imagine the giant, like, Holy Mary, Mother of God moment when Michelle read the email and was like, yo, Denise, we got a problem, Houston. You know, like, I'm about to be outed for being a racist. Like, can you imagine? Oh my gosh. And is anybody, like, was she expecting people to just be quiet about that? Like, oh yeah, we went to Michelle's party. And all the white people figure out that they weren't invited? That's crazy to think that, I don't know. What, like, you come in the door like, don't tell anybody. Whatever you do, don't tell the white people. That's horrible. But the fact that there was no apology, or the fact that she's not booted off the team for, being a hypocritical racist, is appalling to me, at least. However, it's not surprising. And it's not just because I believe that these people are hypocritical, agenda-driven people who feel that they have some sort of racial entitlement. No, that's not what it is. It's because Jesus said this was going to be the deal. If you haven't read Matthew 24, I highly encourage that you do so. I also encourage you to read it in the King James, as well as a couple of other versions. Like, I'll bounce back and forth between the English Standard, the New King James, whatever will help you to understand what is being said. And that goes for the whole Bible, by the way. But what's more is that when you start learning to go to the original language, okay, this is where you get the meat and the potatoes. So you can find that at blueletterbible.org, and I'll go ahead and put that in the description as well. But here's what I'm talking about. Matthew 24, also called the Olivet Discourse, just in case you guys don't know that. Whenever you hear Olivet Discourse, they're talking about Matthew 24. And it's a huge prophecy. And it talks about what will happen at the end. And in verse 7, it says this: For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. In particular, I'd like to focus on the words nation versus nation, because in the Greek, it's ethnos. Ethnos versus ethnos. Ethnicity versus ethnicity. And so where do we see this, y'all? Where do we see this? The United States is the biggest melting pot in the world, right? But let's go just a smidge further. There's this huge misconception regarding racism. Like, who can actually be racist and who can't possibly be racist? It's almost like there's rules, right? This is what I've noticed, and I'm calling it out. And people are going to probably get mad at me, but this is the truth. Like, I've heard people say that all white people are racist and that black people can't be racist. And that's not true. Asians can't be racist. That's not true. Clearly, we see Michelle Wu She's clearly of Asian descent. And she sent out invitations to an no white people allowed party. Okay. And her black assistant sent it. And her black assistant didn't stand up for it and say, you know what? This is probably wrong. So there's that. And I just watched this short blurb where this dude, he went around asking all these young people of all different ethnicities, and they're like all college years-ish. Okay. So I think it was a college campus he was on, but he went around and he would ask them what ethnicity they were and if they were proud to be this or that. Right. And all of them said, yes, I'm proud to be this or that ethnicity, except for one. This girl, she says she's half white and half Ecuadorian. And he says, are you proud to be half white and half Ecuadorian? And she says, no, she's proud to be half Ecuadorian. Then came the white people. And none of them said they were proud to be white. I mean, he then goes on to say some pretty wise things regarding skin color and why, we shouldn't be proud of the skin color that we're in. Instead, we should be proud of other things like, heritage or, our academics or whatever. But our skin color? Like, no. That's not something. I'm proud to be white. I'm proud to be who I am. And it just so happens that I'm in a white body. It's also overweight. But whatever. What I really wanted to focus on right now is the fact that there's this really divisive rhetoric being taught. And it's sinking in. And it's a double whammy. Okay? Because we've got CRT, which is critical race theory. You guys, this is a problem. It demonizes white people for being born white. And it inherently makes young kids, especially boys, feel like they're just born evil because they're white males. This is bad. Very, very bad. And what's worse is that it manipulates young people of color into ignoring or becoming blind to all of the wonderful things that people of color have done in history. It gets them thinking that their brain would never be enough to get the job done because of their skin color that they were born with. It teaches a big fat lie that says that they're weak because of their skin color. That's not a good thing. I do believe that everybody should learn history, but I believe that everybody should learn proper history. I don't think that we should take away from anybody's history. I also think we need to learn from history. And I believe that what's happening right now is we're repeating it. And it's not a good thing. It's divisive and it's evil, steeped in hate. It's certainly not wrapped up with a bow of love. Okay, I'll tell you that right now. And we need to understand that in the end of days, God reveals the truth and peels back the curtain so that those of us who actually want to see the truth will. And it's happening. He's letting the truth come out in so many ways, even if it's so easy to see just by using deductive reasoning at the very least, And I want you to understand something. I grew up in a family that devoted much of our family time for civil rights. My mother worked with Focus Hope. She still is with Focus Hope, which, if you don't know what Focus Hope is, it's an organization that was founded in Detroit by Father Cunningham and Eleanor Justice, and I knew them both very, very well. Father Cunningham was awesome. He rode a Harley, and he always had a leather jacket on. I used to call him Uncle God. Anyway, my mom was a civil rights activist in Detroit, and I got to see the ins and outs of so much of it. I was blessed to be able to sit on Rosa Parks' lap. I had no idea at the time what an honor it was for me. It is today, I get it today, but it still amazes me that a woman would be tired, right? She was so tired that she just was like, nope, I'm not getting up. I'm, determined. I'm not going to get up because I'm tired and I deserve to sit here just as much as the next person. And what comes after that is a total revolution, a call to action. And you know what? She had no idea that her bold action would spur that. And I honestly believe that Dr. King would be smacking some people upside the head right now. I'm just saying that. Here's the deal, right? Racism exists across all factions of culture, religion, and skin tone, period. But you know what I find the most offensive of all of it? Is when a person has enough nerve to scream, I'm the victim of racism, and then go on to perpetuate that ideology by teaching it to their children. It's hypocritical. It's ugly. It's downright foolish. It's evil. I was on the internet looking for something, and I heard this black pastor tell his congregation that the white man was the devil. Those were literally his words, and that it was scripturally backed up by the Bible. And I have yet to run across those passages, by the way. If anybody else does, please let me know. But whatever, what actually really broke my heart was when the camera panned over to all the little children who were sitting in front of him, just soaking it all in. And let me tell you why that made me angry. It's not because I'm white. Okay? That's not why that made me angry. It makes me angry because here we have a pastor who's supposed to be preaching about the love of Jesus, right? Love. And instead, he's literally just doing the devil's work for him. I mean, I was livid, you guys. I was like, how dare you? How dare you take on the title of shepherd and then go on to insult the very being that created you to go and create disciples in his name? Guys, listen to me. I have had my own experiences. I've had my share regarding racism, and I'm not talking about stereotypes or culture either. I'm talking like all of those things aside. I'm talking like literally being called out as a lesser human being because of a person's skin color, okay? I've got some stories. I was actually hit by a truck once by a bunch of skinheads. But anyways, I'll save those for another time. I just remember being a young child, say like 4 or 5 years old, and one day my dad brought home some eggs. This guy had a bunch of chickens, and he brought some eggs home from work, and they were the brown eggs. And I was so excited to cook them up. I'd never seen them before. And I was so excited to cook them up because I thought that somehow they would taste different. And when I cracked them open, I'm not going to lie, I was totally disappointed. Like I'm like, really? That's it? It's the same thing. But then it was like God was showing me that the eggs are just like people. Like, and as a child, right? This is what I'm getting as a child, that when they're cracked open, not only do they look the same, but they're just as delicious as the white ones, if not better. I mean, they are actually better. Fresh eggs are better. Whether they're white or brown, it doesn't matter, but those were fresh. Anyway, it was at that moment, though, that I really grasped the idea that God was the one who chose us to be who we are. Okay, like he chose us to be who we are. And as I got older, I started having this like righteous anger when I saw racism rearing its ugly head. I hated it. And here's the thing, guys, it doesn't matter what a person believes, but one thing is for sure, and that is that no one chooses who their parents are going to be. No one chooses what their ethnicity will be or what culture they'll be born into. Nobody. But if you call yourself someone who believes in God or moreover a follower of Christ, then frankly, it should piss you off when you see racism of any sort come about. Because downgrading a person because of their skin color is offensive to God. Okay? And not that God needs our help by any means, like to avenge him or whatever. He doesn't need that. In fact, he makes it blatantly clear that vengeance is his. And we should hold out for that. But we're supposed to call things out that are wrong, dude. And racism in any fashion is wrong. He created every single one of us, and He clothed us in the bodies, i.e., the temples that house Him. So I'm just saying, if you believe in God and stand for someone's actions that speak to a person being of lesser quality due to their skin color, then you're allowing someone to say that God screwed up. And that's just not an option. That's just not an option. You got to stand up for what's right. And you're probably going to lose some friends over that, by the way. So this brings me to Miss Carolyn's email. And I thought I'd answer these questions and kill two birds with one stone while pointing out the truth of the matter. So, of course, the idea here is to know what is deception, division, and distraction, right? We need to get discernment for that. Per usual, I'm going to have to pull out some things out of the cabinet in order to make it make sense, but I promise I'll tie it all together. If you haven't got this by now, you know that things can get kind of deep in these podcasts and go in many different directions, but you just got to track with me. Of course, if you find that you have any questions after the fact, don't hesitate to reach out, or even if you have comments, or even if you don't agree. Let me know. All's well. I still love you no matter what. So Carolyn asks, ever since the Israel-Palestine war, I keep hearing words like Zionist and how so much of this is rooted in the Scofield Bible, and how evangelical Christians and politicians have used Israel as a way to fund wars and condone everything that Israel does. She says, I know the Bible says we're to stand with the Jews, and I do believe in the entire Bible, but I have a lot of questions as to how the Israelis have treated Palestinians and why the USA should fund their war when we are in greater debt than they are. Okay, so let's stop and we're just going to unpack some of this right now. Right out of the gate, I'm just going to say that there's this thing. I can't get into it right now because I don't have all of the information, but we just print money. Okay, we just print money, and we're going to continue to just print money until the beast system happens. So, yeah, we're in debt, but it's fake. Just to kind of be simplistic about it, they're just going to keep on printing money. But the word Zionist is, in the simplest terms, someone who believes that the Jews should have their own nation. And the Scofield Bible is basically it's a King James version, except it's annotated. And what that means is it's got comments within the passages. The guy who did it, Cyrus Scofield, he commentates throughout the passages, and he gives his opinions basically on what the things mean. The next thing I'm going to say about this is important that it doesn't get misconstrued, okay? But when we depend upon people to give us clarity, or should I say like one resource, that's when problems arise. Putting people on pedestals will ensure that you're going to be disappointed. I promise. So don't do it, okay? Not even with your pastors, because we fail. The video that Eric and I did the other night, talking about a listener who was asking if going to church was necessary to have a relationship with God. It left a bitter taste in her mouth because she was hurt by the church. This is what happens. And that's just the way it is, because the devil is steeped in everything. So that's why we have to be diligent, right? What matters is, so we're going to fail, but how teachable are we? Do we fail and then know that we failed and then justify that failure? Or do we seek forgiveness and then clarity for change and justice to what's correct? Which way are we going to go, right? Anyway, this is why you'll always hear me say, stick to the King James, flip to a few different versions in order to get a good understanding, but always go back to the original Hebrew and Greek. You're going to get so much more out of it. And then you can circle back to the King James. So don't just stick with the Scofield Bible, right? I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying, go broad. Getting commentaries is a good thing, especially when it comes from many sources. Because again, iron sharpens iron, right? But We got to be like the Bereans of the Bible. They were pretty steady in their ways, in that it didn't matter that Paul himself was preaching to them and that Paul was like a celebrity. They didn't care. They always went back to make sure that what he was saying was biblically sound. And so we got to do the same thing. We need to test all things against the word, and we need to test the prophets too. Anyway, so that said, here's the deal, right? The Bible says that those who touch Israel touch the apple of his eye. Touch the apple of God's eye. Zechariah chapter 2, verses 8 through 12. For thus said the Lord of hosts, after his glory sent me to the nations who plundered you, for he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. Behold, I will shake my hand over them, and they shall become plunder for those who served them. Then you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion. For behold, I come, and I dwell in your midst, declares the Lord. And many nations shall join themselves to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people. And I will dwell in your midst, and you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. By the way, this is Jesus he's talking about here. And the Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. Did you hear that? The Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and again will choose Jerusalem. But we're not going to stop right there, because Schofield likes to use this next verse here. From Genesis chapter 12, verse 3 says, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. But guess what? That's not enough for me. Okay, I'm going to keep going and look for some more. So I'm going to take this into a different direction that makes sense, and then I'll tie it all up with a big bow of love, okay? But before I do that, I want to address that other question or idea that evangelical Christians and politicians have used Israel as a way to fund wars and condone everything that Israel does. Also, the questions regarding how Israelis have treated Palestinians and why the USA should or should not fund their war when we are in greater debt than they are. Here's what I can tell you. We have supported Israel for the last 75 years, militarily speaking. What I think is important here is that we don't have to agree with what anyone is doing, especially when it comes to funding hate or war. But this is what we got to understand this. These things have been written, okay? These bad things that are happening right now, they've been written. It's in prophecy. And the reason is to ultimately get us home. It's to get us to the end of the book, which, by the way, we're in. We're in the end of the book now. Okay, it's to get us home. And so while we don't always understand the logic behind God's decision, we must respect it. Okay, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His logic is higher than our logic. We're not always going to get it. But we do need to respect it. Also, while I believe that the current climate as Christians serves as somewhat of a twofer in that blaming the evangelicals and the politicians, I assume you're meaning right wing, for funding these wars and condoning what Israel does, it's definitely ripe for the picking. I don't believe it's entirely true. Example, Biden just signed over some $14 billion or something to Israel. And here's the thing, no matter who's in office, 15% of the budget goes to them. And it's been that way for a really long time. So that in and of itself is more of a politician thing, I think, more than an evangelical thing. But to add to that, and this isn't new, the deep state, which I'll add includes certain players who are either a part of the Federal Reserve or at the very least they influence them, have been at this a long time. This game's been going for a long time, and their goal is to create a narrative that serves one agenda, and that's their agenda. It's in these instances that we need to be able to discern between the deception, division, and the distractions, right? You get where I'm going with this. We need to treat it like it's a murder investigation. which kind of sucks, to be honest with you, because it takes a lot of time, but we need to be able to pick it apart to see the W's behind the narrative. You know, the who and the why and the what and so on. Money can get just about anyone to do just about anything. And I'm just going to go out and say that the Luciferian guy, Nathan Rothschild, he was a Luciferian. He knew this very well. And so, you know, and if you go online and you look up all the crazy things regarding the Rothschild line, you'll see nothing but like defense and debunking when it comes to the potentiality for things like Luciferianism or owning the banking system. That's another one, along with some others, of course, like JP Morgan Chase and what have you. But, you know, how he and others made money with war. I mean, yeah, it's a thing. But if you dig into a different direction that points the finger at literally anyone else, well, I should say anyone else that like maybe doesn't have as much money, unless they're Christian or Republican. And I do say that loosely, by the way. It just seems like the narrative is different, even if there's proof, like the New World Order. You know, I mean, that in and of itself, they keep on saying is a right-wing evangelical conspiracy theory. It's not. It makes me nuts. But anyways, whatever. Again, God's pulling away the curtain on things, and it's all just coming to the surface so they can say what they want. Also, you know, the military-industrial complex and the banking system go hand in hand. And it's going to continue this way until God rolls the credits on this horror flick that we've got going on right now. But it's actually run by people we don't even know. And the puppets are simply the politicians who are caught in the web. Or it's people that were born into it and they understand it and they've been brainwashed by it. They know it well. And so they perpetuate the lie on purpose, probably not even realizing that that's exactly what's going on. So as far as the evangelical thing, I think this comes from the biblical stance that says that it's in our best interest as allies, you know, to be allies with Israel because God said so. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm just going to say this, like, do you want to be one of the countries that is against Israel, knowing what God said would happen? No, I'm good. Even though I think that we're kind of screwed right now, like everything's just nuts, I still wouldn't want to be anywhere else. You know, and that said, I don't think we always need to agree with what they're doing. But I also believe that this is where we need to be able to have the discernment to see what is a distraction versus deceit. The narrative is everything, you guys. In researching the history of the Palestinians and the Jews, I could see how the surrounding Arab governments were the ones who created the quote-unquote occupation mess to begin with. And what's more is that they even admitted it. They all admitted it. It's, you know, we're not taught that, but they admitted it. And there you have deception and division. And so, like, while we're on the subject, here's something most people don't know. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees came to the U.S. looking for asylum and protection from the Nazis prior to 1942, when our history teachers like to tell us that the U.S. finally learned of the atrocities and genocide going on in Europe in 1944 or something. No, 43. I don't even know. 1942. Whatever. We knew about it way before then. One man pleaded guilty to being a spy. And Roosevelt started to use this as an excuse and even went as far as creating propaganda saying how many German spies they'd been catching. And when the boats came in with the Jews, they sent them all back to Europe, where they got on a train to Auschwitz or Treblinka or Bergen-Belsen or whatever other hellhole of a concentration camp they ended up in. The 1924 U.S. quota there was a quota law, and they set the limit at 25,957 immigrant visas. for people born in Germany. In 1933, the same year that Hitler became chancellor, the State Department issued 1,241. Although 82,787 people were on the German waiting list for a U.S. visa. Most did not have the money to qualify for immigration. And I just kind of have to laugh about that, albeit facetiously. But, as our current situation is dire and we're paying people to flood in without any vetting whatsoever, that's sad. But anywho, my point is, they knew what the story was in 1933. And by the time 1945 rolled around, the total of refugees totaled between 180 and 220,000 refugees. Now, that being said, we did accept more than any other country in the world. But I'm just saying, we weren't taught that stuff in history class. And all things aside, the bottom line is that all of the Abrahamic religions agree that the land, according to God, was deeded to them until the diaspora, when they were dispersed. And we need to keep the big picture in mind here, right? Like, it's an important land, great significance here. Israel is at the very heart in fulfilling prophecy, and it's vital, right? It's at the core of it all. It's important to not only understand, but to accept that without Israel, there is no America, guys. I mean, America is, or at least was, predominantly a Christian nation. At the very minimum, it was in the beginning, even though most of the founding fathers were not truly Christians. They said that they were, but that's another episode. My point is that we are actually grafted into the tree, not the other way around. Okay? Jesus was a Jew. We are the Gentiles. We are grafted into Israel, not the other way around. So as far as condoning everything Israel does, and I could be wrong here, while that may be partially true, especially politically speaking, like in the instance that they sunk these wells for water systems, and I guess they weren't supposed to do that according to international law or something like that. I don't know enough about it, but they actually went on to start footing the bill for the Palestinians for their water, and it's been going on for a really long time. And not just for water, but also for electricity. So yeah, they went ahead and sunk the wells down for water, but they're paying for it. And it turns out that Hamas and other terrorist factions have been stealing it for themselves. I also feel like we need to recognize that there are innocent people who are being held against their will and caught in the crossfire here. They're being flat out murdered, and they're Palestinians. So this is something bigger. These terror organizations are straight up using these people to protect themselves as like human shields. So who's really to blame here, right? I have to say, I truly believe it's those who are funding these activities. And maybe part of it is the U.S. In fact, I'm sure that that's a thing. That's a whole nother episode. And more than that, I kind of feel like it's probably those who are within the banking system, if you know what I mean. And so then the question becomes, why do they do this? It's war. War makes money. It always has. And I mean, seriously, if you really want to know and you want to see the connection to money, all you got to do is really dig behind every assassination of every U.S. president in our history. Follow the money in the military-industrial complex. You're going to see. But let's not forget how we, the people, get to these places where we're sadly faced with these questions. It's all in the media. It's all in the narrative that we are fed. And so we have to remember that just like in Europe during World War II, the amount of propaganda that was force-fed down the throats of every Palestinian from birth, stating how bad the Jews are, is definitely a thing. And let's remember that we know a little bit about this, don't we? Like, you've heard me say that racism of all kinds starts in the home. And if you think about it, not that much time has passed since we've had our share of racist propaganda, right? I mean, it's the same game. Well, sort of. It's all part of the spiritual agenda. But Israel's tied to the end of days. And if we follow the prophecies, then we see that Israel's at the heart of it all. No matter what, it's all evil. Which brings me to my next point. Carolyn goes on to ask about some books. She says there were 2 books that were brought to her attention, and she's never heard of them, but wondered what my thoughts were. The first one was Gary Wayne's Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and the other one is Bloody Zion by Edward Henry. Okay, so Genesis 6 Conspiracy is actually not a new thing. He's got a part 2 coming out, and I'll be totally transparent in saying that I didn't actually read it. But I didn't read it only because I kind of feel like I'm up to speed on the subject. I'm not saying that I know everything there is to know about it, but just based on the Cliff Notes, he and I are on the same page. Basically, he speaks about the bloodline of the Nephilim and how it's part of the reason that we're in the situation that we're in today. We definitely agree on that. If you go back and you listen to the episode that I did on the Nephilim, God and mass murder, you'll hear what I have to say about that. It's part of the reason why we're in this mess. But he also goes on to talk about secret societies and their role, which I also talk about in, I can't remember which episode, but he and I are in agreement for the most part. But there's one thing that makes me leery. Okay. He literally states that the Antichrist comes from the Nephilim bloodline. And while that might be possible, I don't believe that can be biblically backed. There's too many opinions out there and not enough evidence, and just opinions on who the Antichrist is and where he's going to come from. Some people think he's going to come from Rome. Some people think he's going to be from the tribe of Dan. Some people think he's going to be a Jew. I mean, there's so many things. Okay. Some people think he's going to come from Europe, from Russia. I don't know. There's just too many things. And so when a person says something like this with that much certainty, I tend to be a little bit leery. So that said, I have been working on some things that I'm putting together. I've actually been working on it for a really long time, regarding the characteristics of the Antichrist. So just bear with me, because I'll go ahead and, one day I'll get to that. But as far as the book Bloody Zion, so I dug into this a little bit, and it did not take me too long to understand that this is not a book for anyone who wants to stay in truth. Okay? This book aligns with deception and division. While Edward may have some accurate data here, his rhetoric seems to be one-sided, okay? And I really feel like it's a backhanded smack in the face of what's biblically accurate. His rhetoric seems to align with something called replacement theology. Whether he claims this or not, his rhetoric speaks of it. And this theology states that God is done with Israel. And this just is simply not true. It does not align biblically. And we know this because if God were done with Israel, we would not be seeing any of the prophecies coming to pass where he favors Israel. Like, Israel wouldn't even be a thing if he were done with Israel. And not to mention the fact that, we wouldn't see the tribulation. The tribulation is God's last-ditch effort to get the Jews to become unblinded to see who their Messiah is. And it's prophesied in the Old Testament in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. They do finally see and understand who their Messiah is. He is the one, quote, the one they've pierced. He is Jesus Christ. They mourn for him like they would their firstborn. And this happens at the Battle of Armageddon in the Valley of Megiddo, which is the second coming. And that is at the end of the book, right? So with all that being said, if you want my opinion on this, stay away from it, because I feel like it's straight up heretical. It's heresy. It's heretical. I don't think it's a good thing. Okay. Next is I need to take a sip. Hold on. Okay. She says, there's so many voices out there. And by the way, I know that this is something that many people are concerned about. Okay, so this is definitely important. She says, I know I've heard so many voices out there, and I know the Bible says that in the end times there will be many false prophets. I know there are pastors that have used Israel as a way to raise money for personal gain. I hear so many people saying, stand with Israel and pray for Israel, which I do, but I rarely hear them saying, pray for Palestinians. I know of several Christian Palestinians. Thanks so much for your time for reading this. Of course, Carolyn, anytime. Thank you for sending it. First of all, those Christian Palestinians are our brothers and sisters. They are part of the grafting into Israel, just like any other Christian in any other country. So it's our duty to pray for each other, no matter where we are in the world. Okay? And yes, many false prophets, many, which is why we need to pray for discernment. And we need to pray for discernment for others too, because I'm telling you right now, like, there's guys out there right now calling themselves Jesus Christ. There's one in Siberia, I think. I'm not 100% sure where he's from, but people will hike up a mountain just to go see him. And he was just like a regular dude. But he believes he's Jesus Christ, and so do these other people. And I think it's because they're not reading a Bible. In fact, that makes me think that it is in Siberia or something like that, because they don't, for a while there, they didn't allow Bibles. They were like an atheistic country, I think. I don't know. I can't remember. Just scratch all that. Anyway, I want you to memorize this, because just like there's the W's, there's also the D's, right? Discernment during the devil's deceptions, distractions, and divisions. Discernment during the devil's deceptions, distractions, and divisions. And there's a surefire way to be able to get through those things. And it's going to be the verse of the day, I think. I hope, if I picked one. But the same goes for the pastors who use Israel for monetary gain. God's going to deal with them. He's got a special place set aside for these guys. Read Jeremiah 23, 2 Peter chapter 2, Matthew 23:14. Proverbs 19, verse 19 says, a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will perish. And I mean, there's more where that came from, obviously, but my point is that these guys have been around for a really long time, and Jesus tells us there's going to be the wolves in sheep's clothing. And I get it. Like, these are the people that give good Christians a bad name. Not that there's ever a good Christian, but I'm just saying, like, true followers of Christ. These are the ones that give us a bad name. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 15, also in Mark chapter 9, verse 42, and like all of Jude, which by the way is very, very short. It's one page. He speaks about this stuff. He gives it all to us. So the only answer I can give you here is that we need to remember that the enemy mimics God in all things. And so our comfort here is simply understanding who's behind those deeds. Okay, it's not God. And then knowing that there's a special place set aside just for them. They get special privileges. They get to take the cuts in line that await doom. Like, they're gonna be awaiting their assignment to their new eternal abode, which is going to be like a quaint little corner in hell forever. And I don't feel bad saying that, because I know that they know what they're doing. But we need to pray for them anyway, right? Because maybe they'll wake up and change. But regarding praying for the Palestinians, I'm wondering why you're not hearing these things. I'm not trying to be sarcastic or anything. I'm just wondering, like, I know this might sound stupid, but could it be an algorithm thing why you're not seeing that? The only reason I say that is because I'm experiencing the opposite. I'm seeing a lot of sympathy for the Palestinians. Like, for instance, AP News won't even call Hamas a terror organization. They call them militants. which is garbage. Regardless, we need to be praying for all people, you guys. In fact, the Bible says that we're to be praying for the wicked too, whatever side they fall on. That means that if you're a Republican, you should be praying for Biden. And if you hate Trump, guess what? You should be praying for Trump. Anyway, I'm sorry. I can't really give you a better answer than that. I wish I could, but I'll just add this one last thing. Back in November, a Wake Forest University professor by the name of Laura Mullen resigned after she made some comments on X saying, "So it's kind of a duh, but if you turn me out of my house, plow my olive grove, and confine what's left of my family to the small impoverished state you run as an open-air prison, I could be tempted to shoot up your dance party, yeah, even knowing you will scorch the earth." And here's the things, guys. The things. This, number one, is a classic example of someone who thinks that they know their history just because they hold a degree. I'm also going to add that she happens to be a creative writing professor, but the tweet lacks basic proper English. Anyway, never mind that. Here's the thing. She's talking about she could be tempted to shoot up a dance party. That would have been merciful. Okay? Shooting up the dance party was like the most merciful thing that they did that day. What they did could only have one force behind it, and it's called evil. It's purely demonic. Like, anyone that hollers Allahu Akbar while doing these things that they did should seriously re-examine some things. Okay? And so then what are we left with here? Well, there's clearly no shortage of deception. Okay, we have that. We also have distraction. We have division. It's all relative to each other. You know, an example is the Bloody Zion book. That is definitely categorized as deception. The distraction would be the act of what Hamas did in general, along with the recent shootings since then. Oh yeah, and there's the impeachments, and then like the whole political propaganda stuff. Like, you name it, okay? And then there's the division that's simply a result of the previous two. But you know what? There does seem to be a shortage of discernment. So we need to ask for that. A really good way to be able to gauge what comes from where is to ask yourself this question. Does this or that bring you closer to God or farther from Him? Like, we're living in the age of deception here. We need to be able to lean on one another for encouragement and edification. So that being said, if you guys ever have any questions, you know how to follow or find me, right? I'm not saying I'm always right, but if I don't have an answer for you, I'm going to do my best to find one. I just really feel like we need to start reaching out to each other a little bit more in order to be able to gain the discernment that we need. I did find some good links that I think would be beneficial, so I'll be sure to put them in the description. But here's the bottom line, guys, okay? Jesus was a man that preached love, but He didn't tolerate injustice and foolishness, okay? And I feel like in this day and age, we're too afraid to stand against those things. Injustice looks like a guy named Enoch Burke, who's a teacher in Ireland who has spent over 200 days in prison for refusing to use the wrong pronoun for his trans student. And he's been labeled a transphobic. There was another teacher I just read about too today, earlier. The story is escaping me now. I can't remember his name, but he was in the U.S. Foolishness is standing up for a cause we know nothing about, only to find out that it's saturated with evil and lies. And since racism is a part of today's episode, I'm going to say it. How about Black Lives Matter? This organization is steeped in deception, divisiveness, and distraction. So many Christians that personal friends, so many were supporting this institution, not realizing that their mission statement was to literally dismantle the Western nuclear family unit, meaning a father, mother, and children. They instead pushed the philosophy that the role of the fathers was no longer needed and instead leaned on a, quote, it takes a village rhetoric. So basically, other people raising your kids, right? And then they received a bunch of flack for this statement from a retired NFL lineman named Marcellus Wiley. And he was the one that was able to spark a shift of focus here. At first, they tried to say that he was taking it out of context. Well, I'm going to read it to you, and then you can tell me what you think, right? So this is what their mission statement used to say. Quote, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Like, it's a word salad that literally removes fathers from the entire rhetoric of the whole thing. So after Wiley blasted BLM to his followers and told them that it's not a good thing, their support went down by 12% in just a couple days. And then out came Patrisse Cullors, and then her fellow co-founder, Alicia Garza. Both of them are self-proclaimed, quote, trained Marxists. They actually ended up going on to remove the language. But that doesn't mean that they're not still working on this agenda, y'all. Okay? Like, let's not forget who had a huge hand in funding these people. Wiley goes on to say the following. I don't know how many people really look into the mission statement of Black Lives Matter, but I did. And when you look into it, there's a couple things that jump out at me. And I'm a Black man, he says. 2 things. My family structure is so vitally important to me. Being a father and a husband, that's my mission in life right now. How do I reconcile that with this mission statement that says we dismantle the patriarchal practice? We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement. Like, he said no. And that's bold. He's a smart man who didn't just fall for the surface narrative just because the people who were dishing it out looked like him. And we shouldn't either, okay? Like, literally all he did was go look at that mission statement. And you know what? He probably lost some friends over it. I'm just going to say I did. I lost some friends over it. But you know what? That's okay. It's truth. And so here's a tip. Evil in general has to identify itself, okay? Somehow it has to identify itself. That's a prerequisite. And so all we need to do is simply look for it. And God will show it to us. Maybe that's in the form of checking in the mission statement on some organization that claims to be something that they're not. But I'm just saying that for the sake of our kids, our families, and our friends, we need to start being bold in the face of what the enemy uses to destroy us. Most oftentimes, the devil likes to use those closest to us. So remember that the next time you have a rift between you and someone you love. Okay? Get to know your enemy, you guys. Because he keeps changing. He will change it up on you. You get to know your enemy and his style of fighting, and chances are you'll be able to see what's coming. Or at the very least, have someone around you to remind you of it. But here's the deal, we need to start having the confidence to be bold. That's just plain and simple. And we need to do it on a daily basis and stand up for what's right. I'm so tired of the whole PC movement. There are still absolute truths, and we need to stand up for those truths. Fear is the only thing that stops us, and we're not made for fear. We're not made for that because our time here, although it's temporary, literally means everything beyond this life. And I'm not saying we should walk around being annoying, righteous snobs, but dude, come on. We can love everyone and not have to affirm their way of thinking. Did you know that? Just because I refuse to call you a cat when you're clearly a man doesn't mean that I'm transphobic. I'm not scared of you. I just know that you're a man because I can see your Adam's apple. And if you're meowing, that doesn't make you a cat. Just because you're standing in a garage doesn't make you a car. Come on, right? And here's the other thing. I found that for the most part, people are just wanting to be heard because we're born with this like giant void. We're literally born lost. And so we're confused in the chaos of everything. And most of the time, people are just frustrated and have questions, and they haven't found anyone bold enough who will speak absolute truth with them or listen to them, for that matter, with a level of respect. Because most of the time, we're so wrapped up in our own opinions that facts go out the window. And you know what? That's when we lose them. That's when we lose them. Like, are people annoying? Mm-hmm. Yep. I just want to shake them most times. But you know what? The bottom line is that God created them too, right? I mean, if you have kids, you know how you feel when someone is a turd to your kid, right? That's how he feels, except it's way more intense because our love could never compare to his. I don't see anybody else wanting to crawl up on a cross like that. You know? And you want to hear something else that's crazy? We don't even have to like the people that are put in our path, because love in and of itself is a completely different thing. It's honestly something that you can only get from Christ. Like, it can only happen when we get out of our own way and see people through the eyes of Jesus. Like, literally think about how he thinks of them. Sin and all, disgust and all, whatever it is, all of it. Because he created them. He knew all of the horrible things that we were going to do in our lives, and he still created us and he still loves us. So we need to try and put those like rose-colored glasses on in order to be able to see through his eyes, right? And when we do, everything becomes clear and you'll be able to see the truth for what it really is, which then gives you the courage and the confidence to be bold, to be bold. And that, dear friends, that's not only how you discern the deceptions and distractions and divisions, but now you can dismantle them too. And that's what it's all about in the end times. Well, that's it for today, y'all. Thanks for showing up again. I know it's always a lot, but I can't help it. I try. But there's just so much information, and it's just so, I don't know, I feel like it's important. And so I just appreciate you guys showing up. What's for dinner tonight, y'all? Jesus told Eric to go get me some pizza, and he did. So you know what that means. And hey, is that someone knocking at your door? Maybe he's got some pizza. Who knows? What kind of pizza do you guys like anyway? Thanks again, guys. This is Brianna signing off, saying God bless.